Okay, welcome to the third session. We are very happy to see here. Today we have the planning phase. We have to work of the logical framework development, and we thank Nicolo for all the work he makes. And so enjoy the session, and we have the opportunity to discuss, to resolve our problems, questions, and to learn together. Okay, good session.
Thank you very much, Diego. So I will share the screen. Okay, so planning phase. As we saw in the last two sessions, after the analysis phase, in the construction of a project, the following phase is the planning phase, is where we transfer the analysis, so the results of our problem and objective analysis, into the logical framework, which is a tool that helps us to have all the information in one place in a synthetic and logical arrangement, which is really, I think, very helpful for many reasons that we will see during this session. So what is a logical framework? You have already worked on logical frameworks, so of course you already know the tool, but I think it is interesting just to go through the different parts of the logical framework to see a bit more in depth what they contain, and then see an example. So as you can see, we have 4 columns and 4 lines where we have the different parts of the project. So in this vertical line, or vertical logic, how many times it is called, there is the logic of the project. So how the project is logically structured, and how the different components of the project are logically connected with one another. So if we start from the activities, they are the practical tasks that need to be carried out in the project, and they will lead to the results, which are, as we said, one kind of objective, but it's a tangible, they are the tangible results of the activities of the project. So it's what we immediately produce with the implementation of our activities. The results, the tangible results that we obtain with our activities altogether will determine the purpose or the specific objective of the project. So the results will determine the change that the project is seeking. And as we saw, if we obtain and arrive at the project purpose, this will contribute to a broader impact, which we call overall objective. So this is the logic of the project. Of course, we can read it from the bottom up or from the top down, this depends a bit on the reasons that we are, I mean, the kind of analysis we're trying to do. Normally in the analysis phase, we start from the central problem and the central objective that is connected to the problem. And then we go down to the results and the activities. But once the project is identified, it can also be useful to work our way up. So to see how the different activities are linked to the results and the purpose of the project. So how effective the project is. So the log frame can be read in different ways for different purposes. But also the other columns of the log frame are important for a good understanding of the project. So as you can see, we have the two central columns, which are the indicators and source of verification. These two columns serve the purpose of measuring the impact, the effects of the project. So for each level of activities, results, purpose, and overall objective, we have one or more indicators that help us understand if the results have been delivered and to measure the results that have been delivered. So, as I said, for each level, we have different indicators. At the activity level, normally you provide a summary of resources and means in the indicator section. That means that the measurement of the activities is given by the amount of resources that are used to realize the activities. That can be human resources, equipment, financial resources. So it's a way of measuring the activities. Actually, one of the ways that is commonly used to understand how a project is performing is the level of expense of the project, so how much the project is spending. And that exactly measures the performance of the activities, because of course the expenditure of a project is proportional to the number of activities that have been performed. But of course, this doesn't give us a good measurement of the impact of these activities. It just gives us a measurement of how many activities have been carried out. That is why at higher levels, so at the levels of results, purpose, and overall objective, we will have indicators which try and measure if the results have been delivered. So try and measure the changes that our project has performed. Then we will see some examples of possible indicators, but usually what we want from an indicator is that it should be as objective as possible. That means that if two different people measure the performance of a project using a certain indicator, they should be able to obtain the same results. And then the indicators should include details of quantity, quality, and time. So measure the quantity of the benefits that the project is delivering, the quality, which sometimes is not as easy as measuring quantity, and the time, so how much time it takes or it took to deliver a certain result or objective. Now, these indicators, we will see them, we will see that the construction and the quality of the indicators, especially in the last session, but I wanted to introduce them as they are an essential part of the log frame. The next column is the source of verification column, and this is exactly the way we indicate for each level where we are going to source the information to measure the results and the objectives with our indicators. So where are we going to get those informations? This is very important because it gives credibility to the indicators, because if we identify some indicators, but we don't know where to source the information needed to measure according to those indicators, that indicator is possibly very difficult to implement, because we don't have a good source of information that can give us the data we need to measure that indicator. So the sources of verification are very important to give credibility to the indicators, so that we know where to find the information, and also who reads and evaluates the project can assess the credibility and the strength of the indicators. And the last column is the one of the assumptions. We will see that a bit more in detail today. The idea of the assumptions is that they are defined as the factors outside the project's control, outside the project's direct control, that may impact the linkage between the different levels of the log frame. So at the activity level, the assumptions are those conditions that will allow the activities that, together with the activities that have been realized, will allow to obtain the results that are stated in the results section here. So it is all those conditions which normally in the log frame are formulated as positive conditions, that together with our activities allow the project to realize the results. So, for instance, if we work with, let's say, in the example we can have it here. The example we used in the second session of a very simple project where, from our analysis, we identified as the project purpose that the frequency of bus accidents in the target area is reduced. Then we can see that in this log frame we have transferred all the information of the objective analysis. Especially a direct transfer is done at the level of the purpose. So the purpose is exactly what in the objective tree was the main problem transformed in positive situation. So this was the main problem, frequent bus accidents, and the purpose will be the positive version of the central problem. So frequency of bus accidents is reduced. And as you can see, this purpose is directly transferred from the the objective tree. The same for the results. Although in this case, sometimes we need to synthesize a bit the results. So we have to find a formulation that gives us a synthetic view of what the results are. So in this case, we had identified different results in three main lines, let's say three main strategic lines. One was the drivers. So that the problem was that the drivers lacked driving skills, so they were not careful enough in their driving. The results is that they are better trained and that they drive carefully. So this result has been, in this case, stated as bus drivers drive carefully. So we take the main idea, the main result we want to obtain in this line. The second line that we selected is the one concerning the state of the vehicles. So the problem was that the vehicles were too old, in bad conditions, they had insufficient maintenance. And so the idea here is to work on a line to improve the maintenance of the vehicles, replace old vehicles so that the vehicles are in good condition. So as you can see, this result has been transferred in the results box. Vehicles are in good conditions. So these two purpose and results are a direct consequence of the analysis of the objective tree. The overall objective is also derived from the objective tree. In this case, the statement could be to contribute to the safety and efficiency of public transport in the target area. Let's see the tree, the objective tree. In the higher parts, we have on the problem side the effects of the central problem, where we identified that passengers were killed or hurt by the accidents, people arrived late, we have economic losses, loss in confidence in the bus company. So as you can see, there are different consequences, different effects of the central problem. If we try and transform these negative effects in positive situations, we will have statements such as few passengers are hurt or killed, people arrive on time, passengers' economic losses are reduced, passenger confidence is restored. So the complex of these positive effects should be stated in the overall objective, but we should try and summarize this. So a possibility would be this formulation: contribute to the safety and efficiency of public transport, which summarizes the safety problems, but also the efficiency in the delivering of the service. These sections are directly derived from the objective tree. Now, the new parts to be filled in are the activities and all the rest of the log frame. The activities should be derived directly from the results. So as we said, the results are concrete, positive situations that our project wants to obtain. So we have to derive logically from each result a series of activities that will enable us to obtain that result. So the logic process is a deduction from the results to the activities. In this case, well, this is a very simple log frame. It's done for a didactic purpose, so I just put a couple of activities here, but it's to give you an idea. So to obtain this result that the bus drivers drive carefully, possible activities may be improved initial training program for drivers. So to implement an initial training program for drivers, which is improved comparing it to the actual one, which might be inefficient, and the introduction of a recurrent training program for the drivers so that they can maintain their skills. There may be other activities, but this is just to give you an idea of the link between the activities and the results. The second result, vehicles are in good conditions. How do we get to this? Possible activities may be to introduce an obsolete vehicle replacement program, to strengthen vehicle maintenance program, and to train the maintenance personnel to enhance the quality of their service. So as you can see, these are activities, are concrete things that the project will have to implement. Each activity will have its costs and will take its time. So from the planning of the activities, then we will be able to derive the costs and the timing of the activities of a project. An important aspect is that the activities should be identified in relation to each result. So we can use the numbering, which is what you usually use, to clearly identify which activities are linked to each result. So for result 1, we have activities 1.1 and 1.2, and for result 2, 2.1, 2.2, etc. So this is quite important. I've seen that in many of the exercises, sometimes the activities are not organized according to the results. This is quite important because it really gives the reader a clear perception of the link between each activity and its result. So it's very helpful to assess the logic which is behind the project. And as you can see, the indicators and source of verification columns have some information that can give us, as we said, the ability to measure the results at the different levels. So in the case of the activities, what we put in the indicators is basically what we are going to use to perform the activities. So funding, training, design experts, training materials, trainings, new vehicles. So it gives us an idea of what we need to implement our activities. And the source of verification will be the budget, because the budget will give us a detailed list and costs of all the means we are going to use to perform the activities. Now, when we move up to the objectives, the indicators become more specific, because as we said, we need that the indicators be as objective as possible and give us a measurement of what we want to achieve with our results. So let's see a couple of examples. The indicator for the first result, that bus drivers drive carefully, answers the question, how can we measure the achievement of this result? And a possible indicator may be the number of complaints for bad driving reduced by 40% by the end of the project. So as you can see, this is a measurement which is objective because it's a number of complaints for bad driving, and we give it a target. Now, this is a decision of the project, so we can decide a target for our result, for our indicator, which we consider satisfying. So we state and we communicate to who is reading our log frame, so possibly a donor, that we will be satisfied with our result number 1 if the number of complaints for bad driving is reduced by 40% by the end of the project. So this is our statement. Of course, we could say 50%, 100%, but what we have to do is to make a decision and identify a realistic figure that can help us measure the achievement of our results. Now, where are we going to find this number, how are we going to measure this? And here is the column source of verification. So in this case, we need to know the number of complaints for bad driving, and we know that we can find it in an annual bus company records of complaints from passengers. Of course, we should, I don't know if now in the real world this exists, but we should verify this before and know that the source of verification is available and indicate where we are going to source the information. For the second results, vehicles are in good conditions. How do we measure this? We can measure it, for instance, counting the number of breakdowns of vehicles and stating that it should be reduced by 30% by the end of the project. So again, this is a number that the project designers state as satisfying, so that they consider that the result is met. Of course, these numbers are decided based on the experience, the knowledge of the sector, based on the activities, and so the impact that the activities can determine. The important thing is that a figure is given so that who evaluates and assesses the project can have a clear idea of the impact that the project is going to deliver. Also, in this case, we have identified a source of verification, in annual bus company maintenance records. And so this will give us the possibility of having the information we need to measure this indicator. The same happens at the higher levels. For instance, frequency of bus accidents, we measure it counting the number of bus accidents and stating that our indicator is that the number of bus accidents is reduced by 50% by the end of the project. In this case, as you can see, we have a couple of sources of verification. Annual police and traffic, annual would be annual police records on traffic accidents and annual bus company accident records. This is so that we can have a more objective source of verification but also an internal source of verification, which might be maybe more detailed. This is just an example to show that in the choice of the sources of verification, we have to try to include, as far as possible, objective sources so that we can have credible data to measure our, let's say, our indicators. Of course, the higher we get in the logical framework, the more general the indicators will be. In this case, we have, well, quantitative and qualitative indicators. For instance, the first one is the number of passengers killed or hurt in accidents is reduced by 25%. And we can have annual health system interventions due to bus accidents. So there might be some public records in the hospitals or in the health system of a certain area where we can get this information. And this is the mostly a quantitative indicator. But we also have a qualitative indicator. In this case, the confidence in public transport is increased by 15%. So how do we measure this qualitative indicator with a survey on confidence in public transport? Now, this is a very debated question. Should find the right balance between the accuracy of the indicators and the sources of verification and the costs of performing the measurement of the indicators. So we have to try and strike a balance because, of course, we could realize many surveys, many researches to have a very strong information and measure very in a very precise way how the project is having an impact. However, this could have a very high cost. So it depends on the kind of project. It depends on also on the willingness of the donors and of the kind of project that we are realizing to find the right balance. Because, for instance, there are some projects which are more oriented to research, which are willing to use an important amount of resources to validate the results of the project. So in this case, we can foresee a very in-depth activities to measure the indicators in a very detailed way. But in other kinds of projects, we should preferably rely on other sources of verification, which are not as expensive, so that we can dedicate the majority of the resources to the implementation of the activities of the project, the realization of the social results and objectives of the project. So this is it. We don't have one answer to this. It depends on the kind of project and on the kind of donor. But the idea is that we can modulate the quality and quantity of measurements that we do to understand the impact of the project. Of course, all projects should have a minimum, at least, number of indicators and sources of verification that allow us to understand and measure, at least basically, if the results are met or not. So this has to always be present, but we can modulate the level of detail depending on the kind of project that we are designing. And the last column is the one of the assumptions. So as we said, the assumptions are the external conditions are positive external conditions that have to be realized so that our activities can lead to the desired results and at the level of the activities, and that the results can lead to the purpose at the level of results and purpose. Let's see an example. For instance, if we realize the training activities for the drivers, which are under our control, it will also be necessary that we have that the bus drivers' collaboration with the project remains positive. We say remains because we should have verified before starting the project that we have a good collaboration of the bus drivers, otherwise we wouldn't be able to start the project. But we assume that their collaboration remains positive, so that we can obtain our results. So this is a typical condition that refers to one of the stakeholders of the project, but there can be different cases. For instance, at the level of the results, if you remember from the problem and objective analysis, in the problem analysis, we had identified that one of the causes of the frequent bus accidents was the bad conditions of roads. But as you saw, this problem, which transformed in objectives would be road conditions are improved, doesn't appear in our results. And this is the choice of the project, because in this case, we can, for instance, the organization that is going to realize this project doesn't have the possibility, the competence, or the means to work on the road conditions. That means that it will not include that strategy in the project, but that problem is still a problem. It's not solved. So somehow we have to consider it, and we may consider that other institutions, for instance, the municipalities, will take care of the maintenance of the roads. We have to verify that this is a possibility, that this actually will happen, so that our project may be effective. But although we verified at the beginning of the project that this will happen, we may still not be totally sure that this condition will continue to be realized during the project. So we indicate it as an assumption. So our reasoning is that if we realize our results and the assumption is met, and the municipality maintains the roads in this case, then we will realize the purpose of the project. So we will reduce the bus accidents. So external conditions, external problems that we have identified that cannot be included in our project, so under our direct control, should be considered as assumptions if we are not sure that they will be met. So this is basically the idea of the different components of the logical framework. Then we will see more in detail how to, which is the reasoning behind the identification of the assumptions. Now, very quickly, because we already saw all this, the details in the log frame, but just a few ideas on what is a log frame. Well, we already saw the vertical and horizontal logic. So vertical logic is the logic that identifies the relationships between activities, results, purpose, and general objective. The horizontal logic measures the effects of our project, specifying the indicators and specifying the sources of verification. So the log frame allows us to organize a large amount of information in a very concise manner. This is, I think, one of the key aspects of a logical framework, because it gives us in one single, very concise tool, the whole project. So it's something that I think is very important for us to identify early in the process of preparing a project, because if we identify clearly all the elements of a logical framework, then we have the structure to be able to further develop the different components of and write the different parts of a project document. But the logical framework already contains all the essential parts of our project. And it helps connect all these parts into one coherent document. Well, we already, I think we can see this very briefly. We already saw that the overall objective should explain why the project is important at a society or larger context, in larger context terms. So how our project contributes to a higher level, a broader level of beneficiaries or situations that are broader than the scope of our project. Our project has a very clear scope, that is the specifics objective. That is what we are going to realize with the means that we are going to use in our project and within the time frame of our project. But this will contribute to a higher level benefit, which should be described in the overall objective. That is why in the formulation of an overall objective, we always write contribute to something. For instance, to contribute to the safety and efficiency of public transport in the target area. So we don't realize the whole objective, but we contribute to this. How do we contribute? Through the reduction of the frequency of bus accidents. There may be other projects that contribute in other ways. For instance, a project on the conditions of the roads may contribute to the same overall objective. So as you can see, the overall objective gives us the context within which our project and maybe other projects act to obtain a higher level benefit. The purpose is the scope of our project. So it should address the main problem that we identified, and it will be realized by our project. For instance, increased agricultural production in a certain area, higher immunization coverage, cleaner water, improved legal services. These are examples of project purposes. Of course, this should be then put into context. So where, in what area, for how many people, but the idea is to identify an improved situation that we want to realize with our project. The results are lower level objectives, so they are more tangible products of our activities. For instance, irrigation systems constructed, children immunized, infrastructure built. So these are the building bricks of our purpose. What do we need so to build our purpose? We need more concrete situations, positive situations, useful situations, which we call results. And these results are the direct product of our activities. For instance, the availability of an irrigation system will contribute to enhanced agricultural production, which could be the project purpose. But the irrigation system is the direct product of a series of activities, which can be the design of the system, the digging of the well, the installation of the pumps, and all the technical elements of the irrigation system. So those are the activities that lead to this concrete and tangible result. And the activities are the specific tasks that have to be realized to achieve the results. So, for example, to have a new water supply in a community, we would have possible activities such as establishing a water user committee, writing supply and maintenance procedures, prepare the site, collect the materials, construct tanks, lay pipes, and so on. An important question about the activities is that the log frame should not include too much detail on activities. The log frame, as we said, is a very powerful tool, but it has to be quite synthetic and concise to be effective. So if we put too much detail in the description of the activities, then we may lose its effectiveness. So the recommendation would be to be very concise in the log frame, in the description of the activities, and maybe being a bit more detailed in the project document. So where in the section where we explain the activities, there we can be more detailed in explaining all the activities. One example may be there are some activities that are linked. So some activities prepare other activities. So in a detailed description, we can describe all the steps that we need. So for instance, if we have to build an irrigation system, we will have to, for instance, do a market research, to buy the equipment, then set out a call for proposals to be able to buy the equipment at the best price. Then we will have to actually transport the equipment to the site. So these are under, let's say, sub-activities that can be detailed, but we should not give this kind of detail in the log frame. Otherwise, it loses its conciseness. So we could summarize this succession of activities in sourcing and implement and building of the piping system, for instance, sourcing of materials and installing the piping system. So a concise way of explaining a series of activities that can be further broken down in the detailed description of the activities. So this is important, yes, because the log frame should really be a short document. It should be a couple of pages so that we can really have a clear and immediate idea of what the project is and what the links are between activities and results and objectives. The indicators, we might see this a bit more in detail in the last session, where we will work a bit more on the monitoring of the project. The assumptions, as we saw from the examples, are conditions which could affect the progress or the success of our activities, but which are not under the direct control of the project. Normally, we state the assumptions as positive statements of a condition that must be met for the objective to be achieved. So as we saw in the example, as you can see here, we have positive statements. So the assumption is that bus drivers' collaboration in the project remains positive, or economic conditions of the bus company remain stable. So they are positive assumptions that allow us to obtain the results or the purpose of the project, depending on the level of where the assumptions are made. As you can see, at the level of the overall objective, we don't have assumptions. This is because in the logic of how you read a log frame, the idea is that we read the log frame in this with this pattern. So if the activities are undertaken and the assumptions are met, then we can produce the outputs or results. And so this is the first level. Second level, from results to purpose or specific objective, we read it this way. We say, if the outputs or the results are produced and the assumptions are met, then the purpose or outcome or specific objective, they're all different ways of stating the same thing, can be met. At the level of the specific objective, if the specific objective is achieved and the assumptions are met, then we can we can contribute towards the overall objective. So we don't have assumptions here because we don't have a higher level of objectives. This is why the assumptions should be identified at the lower levels of activities, results, and purpose. Now, how do we identify which assumptions should be included in the project and which should not. So the reasoning about the assumptions is summarized in this slide. And the idea is that the first question we should ask ourselves is the assumption important? So is it relevant for our project? Is it relevant at the level of analysis we are working on? So is it relevant, for instance, so that the activities may lead to the results or the results to the purpose? So if it is not relevant, then we do not include it in the log frame. Examples of non-relevant assumptions are very general assumptions, like the national economic situation, or the fact that there might not be, let's say, social general disruptions. Of course, it could be relevant if it happens, but the probability is not that high, and it's not directly linked to the activities of the project. Of course, if a disaster strikes, then that will have let's say, an impact, but it is not something that our project can act on directly. So the idea is that the assumptions are something external to our project, but somehow we can still act on them. So, for instance, in the example we saw before, the interest of the bus drivers that should continue to be positive in the project. If this doesn't happen, of course, this is not under our direct control, but we can do something about it. We can organize a session to inform them, to try and keep them interested in the project. So there is a margin of action. But of course, if the general economic situation of the country is in bad conditions, this is something that, yes, it might have an impact, but we cannot really do much about it. So this is the idea. Is it important for our project? If yes, then we work our way through this reasoning. If no, we do not include it. So if the assumption is important, for instance, it's important that the bus drivers continue to be interested in our project, then the next question is, will it hold true? So are we almost certain that they will be interested in the program? For instance, because they really asked for this program, we know that they are extremely interested in the program. They are the stakeholders that more than others advocated for the project to be realized. Then if it's almost certain that the condition will hold true, then we do not need to include it in the log frame. As it is, it shouldn't pose any problem. If it is possible that it will hold true, so we think that the bus drivers will continue to be interested because we spoke with them, we know they are interested, but we're not really extremely sure that it will happen, then in this case, we should include it as an assumption. And why should we include it? Because as we said, we should keep an eye on this condition. So we should monitor this condition. And if there is a problem, if we see that they lose interest, we should act with some kind of corrective action. Like I said, maybe organizing meetings with them, trying to encourage their participation, informing on the project, informing on the good results that the project has. So it is a corrective action. It is not included in the activities of the project because we consider that it should it should happen without our intervention, but we keep it as a reminder. So we keep this assumption in the log frame so that we can monitor it, and if needed, we can act upon the problem. In the third case, if it's very unlikely that the assumption will hold true. So if it is very unlikely that in the example, the bus drivers will be interested because we understand that they are not interested, that they would preferably try and block the project, that they are not interested in this activity, then in this case, we cannot include it as an assumption because it is very unlikely that it will happen. So what should we do? We should try to redesign the project to influence this factor. And that means that, for instance, we should include, for instance, in the project, some activities that might enhance the interest in the project. So, for instance, work on an information campaign, trying to explain and enhance the interest of these stakeholders in the activities that we are planning to realize. Another example would be the one of the roads, of the maintenance of the roads. As we saw before, if it is very unlikely that the municipality will maintain the roads, then we have two choices. Or we cannot, the project maybe not be feasible in the way we identified it, or we should redesign the project, for instance, adding some activities and some results. In the case of the roads, we might decide that in certain areas we should directly maintain the roads because there is no external institution or organization which will likely do this important task. So this is the idea of which is the reasoning behind the inclusion of the assumptions. To conclude the log frame presentation, we can say that the log frame is very important for the reasons we saw, because it gives a very clear and concise idea of the project, but it also helps us as a communication tool, because it is, as it is a very clear presentation of the whole project, it can be very useful to help communicating the project to other stakeholders, decision makers, public institutions, other partners, donors. So it is a very powerful communication tool, and it should be a dynamic tool during the realization of the project. So it's something that we keep, we continue referencing during the project realization. For instance, updating the indicators to monitor the progress of our project, or changing some parts of the log frame if the project is modified in some activities, or maybe we may add a result or change a result, which are changes that sometimes may be necessary during the implementation of the project because the conditions change. So the log frame is a working document. It is very important in the identification phase, from the early stages of the identification, but then it is a dynamic tool that we continue using to communicate with the stakeholders and also to keep track of the project. So this is basically what I wanted to say about the log frame today. Now, before seeing a couple of the exercises you prepared, are there questions or observations? Okay. So if everything is clear, then we can see a couple of the examples of the exercises. I just received a couple, two, so we can have a look at them and see some, give you some observations about with a practical example. So in this exercise, well, there is a part which was not requested, but it's interesting to have and to see the target groups. So there is identification of the target groups. This is quite interesting. Of course, it should be done in the project. So thank you for doing also this work. I think it's very interesting, and it gives an idea of the context of the project. And now concerning the structure of the logical framework, we can see a few, let's say, a few problems in the formulation. So first of all, the purpose and the results of this logical framework are formulated as activities, because you see there is creation of state-supported places of assisted living for people with mental disabilities. So this gives you I mean, the impression of an activity of. So the correct way of stating a purpose is that let's say there is a availability of state-supported places of assisted living for people with mental disabilities. I understand that it seems a very small difference, but it really is quite important, because the purpose and the results really have to give the impression of a situation, of something that has changed. And this is very important also to understand the sustainability of the project. So who reads a logical framework should be able to imagine the situation. So creation of means that I imagine the act of creating these places of assisting living. While if you state it as availability of a sufficient number of places of assisted living, I immediately get the impression of a stable situation, of how the situation will be changed by the project. So this is why I insist a lot in the formulation, because who reads it gets a very different impression. Of course, this contains the purpose. It's very clear, but we have to be careful in how we formulate this. The same for the result. Now we have creation of a place of assisted living, which will serve as a model for the dissemination of experience and for the development of legislative proposals. Now, I have a couple of questions on this and a couple of doubts. So first of all, also this result is formulated as an activity. Now, from what I understand, this result is the availability of one place of assisted living, which will serve as model for the dissemination of the experience. And this should lead to a number of state-supported places of assisted living. Now, if I understand it correctly, but you will, tell me exactly what you meant with this purpose, it seems to me that this result is the result that will be realized by the project. So the project will put in place one place of assisted living that will serve as a model. And that, consequently, it will contribute to state-supported places of living, as it will act as a model. So if this is true, then these two sections should be moved. So this would be the purpose, should be moved up one box, should be the purpose, because it is what the project will achieve with its activities. And this should be moved up to the overall objective. Is this the case?
Yeah, you're right.
Okay, so this is perfect. It really, the idea of this exercise is to understand how to use the tool. So in this case, the results should be of a lower level. So we should move all this, let's say, all this up one box. So this becomes the overall objective. This becomes the purpose, and then we will have to identify some results. So the results would be, for instance, the products of some of the activities. So have, for instance, trained staff, or have a service of legal advice to parents. So break down that purpose, so the availability of the place of assisted living, into the construction bricks of that objective. So the more concrete results that are needed to realize the purpose. Now, I think that this, let's say, this problem in the placement of the different levels also has an effect on the activities, because reading these activities, I have an impression that they are not so specific, so clear, because I don't understand exactly where they lead. This is the importance of the results. So if you have specific results in this section and you link the activities to each result, it is then much more clear why the activities are realized and what is the immediate objective of the activities. For instance, training course for target groups of the project. Okay, I understand that there will be a training course, but I don't understand for which target groups and for which purpose this is done. So is it done to train, for instance, specialists and volunteers or parents, or who is it for? This is why it is very important to identify clearly the results and to link the results to the corresponding activities, so that it is very clear why we do each activity. So this basically is the idea. I think it's very good. Very good job, because there is a clear effort in trying to identify a structure. But of course, it is important to refine this work and put the objectives exactly where they belong, and especially identify clearly the results. The results should really be in a very direct connection with the activities. So the results and the activities together, read in connection with each other, really help to understand the two of them. So I understand better the results if I read the activities that will lead to these results, and I better understand the activities if I understand what they are meant to obtain. So the two things have to be strictly connected.
Thank you. Thank you for the thorough analysis of my case. And I absolutely agree with your interpretation. And okay, no. And I see that the lack of my tree of problems.
Exactly.
Yeah, the first part of this lecture explain me how to work with this logical frame.
Exactly.
Together
Yes.
with the tree of problems.
Exactly.
Okay. Thank you very much.
No, thank you, Oksana. Thank you for your work, which is really, it's very good. And yes, the next thing I wanted to underline is the importance of the problem tree, because that is the main source of all the reasoning for the logical framework. If that is clear, then the logical framework is very easy to build. If that is not clear, it's much more difficult to build an effective log frame. Thank you. Now,
Thank you.
the other example. So in this case, we had a problem and opportunities tree linked to this logical framework. So in the objectives tree, or opportunities tree as it is called in this analysis, we had a central objective, which is socioeconomic integration for refugees. Now, if we go to the logical framework, we have the socioeconomic integration for refugees at the level of the overall objective. So this is a question I ask who has prepared this log frame and objective analysis. Was this, because as we saw last time, this problem and objective tree is a bit different from the model that we saw, because it doesn't have the consequences of the central problem and the central objective. So we don't have the higher part of the analysis, which normally is used to identify the overall objective, the context in which we want to work. So in this case, it could be that the overall consequences of this logic is the socioeconomic integration for refugees. In this case, it would be appropriate to put it in the overall objective, because it is something our project contributes to. But in this case, which is our purpose? So which is the scope of our project? So in this formulation, we have optimized the provision of complementary reception services dispersed through the territory for migrants and asylum seekers by attaching them to a single online platform. If we go back to the opportunities tree, we have different what we would call results, in this case, inclusion in the labor market, optimization of migrant-focused training offers, social inclusion, enhanced possibilities of training aimed at integration. So which would the objective of the project be of these stated in the opportunities tree? It seems a bit of maybe a combination of different here it is, of different objectives. Now, trying to yes, Guy, just a second, and in the results, we have aggregated dispersed services in one online location, which seems to be a part of this. Optimized training offer of complementary services for migrants and refugees in the community. Okay, so these would be the results. Now, as you can see, at a first glance, it is not very clear for me. I, of course, don't know the context. So the idea is that a logical framework should be instead very clear, and the relation between the objective and problem analysis and the log frame should be straightforward. It should be grasped at a glance. Otherwise, it can pose a problem. Okay, so Gaia, yeah, if you can give us your view on this.
Sorry, that really quickly.
No, we can't hear you well.
Okay, no, sorry, because we are two in the same room, so
okay.
It was a bit noisy. Okay, so I just wanted to add something, which is in relation to the tree. So of course, like, yeah, there's one. The problem and opportunities tree, it takes into consideration like different frames of analysis. And what we usually do is like here at this stage, we put in all the inputs and all the problems we can identify. And then in between these four variables, we choose one on which to focus the logical framework. So for example, in this case, that would be the second one from left. I cannot read it very well, but yeah, it should be the optimization of the training offer. And so what we did is like we had these four, then we chose the second one from left, and on this one specifically, we focused the logical framework. And so in relation to this, this is how it worked for us to do this exercise. And my question so with that being said, my question would be, so in relation to the logical framework, how should the overall objective better be formulated? Because you were saying it's not really clear, like the link in the logical framework in between like the purpose, if I'm not wrong, and the overall objective. So I just would like to know, for example, which could be a better formulation of the purpose in this case, assuming that the opportunities tree, of course, it takes like into consideration like different variables, and there's a lot of stuff here that we didn't actually use them in the logical framework.
Okay, thank you very much, Gaia. Yes, I think, of course, there is not one only way of working on these logical frameworks and analysis. There are many ways. Now, the idea, which I think is very important, that in the analysis, you identify one central problem. So in the problem tree, let's have a look at the problem tree. The idea is that you identify one problem, because this is the whole purpose of a project is to simplify a complex situation, because that makes the project effective. So of course the situations can be very complex, but in the approach of a project, the idea is to simplify it and to choose only one central problem that we want to address, and that we can address with our project. This is why the structure is normally done in this way, so that we have only one central problem that corresponds to one central objective, which is the purpose of our project. And at the lower level, we have different causes of this central problem. So you have a certain complexity in the identification of the causes of the central problem, and you can work on some of these or all of these depending on how you on the strategy you choose. But then this one central problem has some effects, higher level effects, which in the objective tree would be the overall objective. So how our project contributes to a general situation. Now, this is the classic way of analyzing problems and objectives. Now, your way of doing it is okay, of course, because it's another way. But in this case, it's from the project point of view, from the logical framework point of view, it's more difficult to identify which is the specific problem that you want to address, because I can see one problem here. So I'm my attention is drawn to this, but then this is not exactly the specific problem that you want to address, because it's too broad. It is more likely the overall objective. So it's something.
But that's it.
That's it.
I mean,
okay.
that's it. I mean, this is the overall objective, and then so we did this, and then we focused on one problem on which to build the logical framework. So as I was saying, in this case, that would be the second one from left.
Okay.
So we chose like this one. So what I guess we should have done, like just focusing on the second one, like developing another free problem. Because I guess the one we did is like an earlier stage. So we had like the overall objective, and we were putting together all the specific objectives we could potentially focus on. So as if I'm correct, you were saying we probably should pick up like one. So in our case, like the second one from left, and then build another tree problem just focusing on this one, right?
Exactly. This is a very good, let's say, brainstorming activity to have the complexity of the situation. But then when we have to identify a project, a specific project, then we have to go down to one central problem or objective. And then in this case, you see, you already have all the structure here, because you will have your results here, your specific objective, and your general objective. So this is okay. But if you include all these other elements, then it is not very clear how you're going to address the problem. Now, these are very important because they might be external conditions. So if you work on this specific objective, it will be also necessary to have for instance, enhanced access to integration services, socioeconomic relational support. And so you will have to identify these as external conditions. But the idea of the project is really to simplify. Just to give you an idea, which is, I mean, this is very interesting because it also shows how the limits, if you wish, of the logical framework. The logical framework has a very high potential in being specific and very useful to concentrate on an objective, and so build a series of activities that tackle that, but it loses the complexity of the situation. This is why in recent years you talk about, there is this concept of the theory of change, which is very much talked about recently, which is a more complex approach which describes a more general idea and exactly describes how you see the changes, how you foresee the way that a social situation may change with all its complexity. So a theory of change, I don't know if you ever saw how it is represented. It is a very complex flow chart with all a different series of strategies or links between activities and situations that describes how a sector may change, which is very important to understand the complexity of the sector. However, when we have to identify a specific project, it is very important to narrow down. Otherwise, it is difficult to identify clearly what actions we have to realize to tackle our problem. So the two things are important, but from the project standpoint, it is very important to identify clearly one central problem, so one objective, which is the scope of the project. So I hope this can help.
Niccolò, I think it's very important to use the three problem and the three of objectives. So it's very easy to work. So this is a methodology we propose, and we think that it's very simple to work.
Yeah, certainly. But of course, it is interesting because the methodology and the way of when we reason on the reasoning on the objectives, the results, it really helps to understand how we get to a certain configuration of a project. So this, as you can see, this analysis is interesting. The question here is understanding at what level we want to concentrate. So the analysis is very effective and valid, but we can concentrate at this level, at lower level, at a higher level. So a project is choosing a certain level. So the question is here, understanding at what level we want to work. And this is why it is very important to work on a good tree of problems and objectives, so that we can decide according to the capacity of our organization, to the skills, to the funds we have, at what scale we can effectively work. So this is the idea behind the importance of this analysis. So we have already gone beyond our finishing time. Anyway, if there is any other question, otherwise I think we can consider our session completed.
So we need to prepare the next section, I think.
Oh yes, sorry, just short, yeah. This is very quickly, I just show you the exercise for the next session. It would be in the same table you used for the logical framework to add some indicators and sources of verification. And if possible, for who didn't do the tree, the analysis of the problem and objective tree, if you could do that as well, so that we have the complete reasoning from the identification of problems, objectives, logical framework, indicators. Yeah, Oksana, if you could do it, because that really I think is useful to understand how it can the whole process. So in this case, it would just be putting the indicators and sources of verification for the different levels of your project. And if you could upload this in Diego, can you open an exercise 3 in the Moodle? Okay. So it would be exercise 3, and if possible, put the whole process in the same file. So
Okay.
objectives and the complete logical framework.
Okay, the idea is to complete the exercise. I think it's a good exercise to begin with the tree of problems and objectives, and to work to the logical framework, and so to finish all the logic journey that we proposed with this methodology. It's a good exercise. Okay?
Yeah, it's become quite clear. Thank you.
Okay.
Good.
So, well, we have another session, the next week, and the idea is to work to share information and to learn together. This is the idea, what I said in the beginning. And if you have any questions, you can write by send an email. It's not a problem. We are available for you. And the idea the next week is to finish all the explanation and the useful also of this methodology. Thank Nicolo, and we'll see you next week. Okay? Have a good time.
Nicola,
Thank
thank you
you.
very much.
Thank you very much. Thank you all.
Thank you.
Bye bye.